true crime stories, so insane you'll question reality. A Swedish man walked into a bank in 2009 wearing a homemade bomb strapped to his chest. But robbery wasn't what he had in mind. His goal was proving a point about security. The bomb squad arrived, negotiations stretched on for hours, and national television broadcast the entire standoff live. The twist came when police discovered the bomb was fake, and the man claimed he'd been conducting a security audit the bank never requested. Detailed plans for similar stunts at 3 other locations filled his apartment when authorities searched it. 2 weeks before the incident, he'd sent the bank a consulting invoice for his services. That's just the first case we're covering today, and the weirdness only escalates from here. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Case Noire. If you're new here, this is where we dive deep into the cases that make you question everything you thought you knew about human behavior. Today, we're looking at true crime stories so bizarre, so completely unhinged that reality itself starts to feel negotiable. Case 1. The Woman Who Wasn't There. Alicia Estevez became the face of 9/11 survival, and for 6 years, nobody questioned her story about escaping from the 78th floor of the South Tower. A man on fire gave her his wedding ring before he died, she told people, and she crawled through smoke and debris while molten metal burned scars into her arm. By 2005, she'd risen to president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network, appearing at fundraisers and memorial events, while the New York Times profiled her story, and schools invited her to speak. And that's when a Spanish newspaper started asking questions. September 11th, 2001, found Alicia Estevez in Barcelona, Spain, nowhere near New York, and certainly not inside the towers. The fiancé who supposedly died that day never existed, which was another cornerstone of her narrative. Confronted with evidence, she vanished overnight, and the Survivors Network discovered that nearly everything she'd told them over 6 years was fabricated. The wedding ring, the man on fire, the burn scars she'd shown people during tearful conversations, all of it carefully constructed from whole cloth. What makes this case so unsettling goes beyond the lie itself. Alicia had studied survivor testimonies with precision, incorporated real details from other people's experiences, and woven them into a narrative so convincing that actual survivors believed her without hesitation. Therapy sessions became opportunities to cry with them, build relationships based on shared trauma that existed only in her imagination, and cement her position as someone who'd lived through the same nightmare. Nobody really knows why she did it, and she's never given a full explanation to this day. Case 2. The Lawyer Who Faked His Own Murder. Marcus Schrenker was a successful financial advisor in Indiana with a serious problem when 2009 rolled around. His investment firm was collapsing. Investigators were closing in on what looked like a massive fraud scheme, and Marcus came up with a plan that sounds like it came from a bad thriller novel, except every part of it actually happened. January 11th found Marcus taking off in his private plane, supposedly heading to Florida for a business meeting. About 2 hours into the flight, he contacted air traffic control and reported that his windshield had imploded, his voice sounding panicked as he said he was bleeding, couldn't see, and the plane was losing altitude. The radio went silent after that. The plane kept flying on autopilot for another 200 miles before crashing into a Florida swamp. Rescuers arrived to find no body, just an open cockpit door and an emergency exit that had been activated mid-flight. Marcus had actually parachuted out over Alabama wearing a helmet and night vision goggles, crashed his plane remotely, and tried to disappear into a new life he'd been planning for months. But here's where it gets ridiculous. His parachute landing didn't go well, leaving him with an injured leg after he ditched his goggles and helmet in the woods and broke into a storage unit to hide. A stashed motorcycle took him to a KOA campground where he checked in under a fake name, and police found him the next day in a tent, bleeding and surrounded by empty bottles after he tried to slit his wrists when he heard them approaching. The whole escape plan fell apart because Marcus didn't think through basic details that any competent criminal would have anticipated. His phone stayed on. He used his credit card at a gas station before the crash, and he told the campground attendant he'd been in a canoeing accident despite being 60 miles from the nearest navigable water. Investigators searching his storage units found $40,000 in cash, fake IDs, and detailed plans for a new life in Mexico. 10 years in federal prison came from the fraud scheme, with additional time tacked on for the fake death stunt. Case 3. The Man Who Lived in the Walls. Rock Hill, South Carolina became the setting for something that reads like urban legend in 2012, except police reports and court documents prove it actually occurred. Tracy, a single mother, started noticing weird things in her house that made her question her own sanity. Nails would appear in weird places, footsteps echoed from the attic when nobody was home, and her daughters complained that someone was going through their things. Stress seemed like the logical explanation until her ex-boyfriend Nathan called and said he'd been getting texts from her phone at 3 a.m., messages she'd never sent and had no memory of writing. One night found Tracy lying in bed when she heard the heating vent rattle above her. A flashlight revealed an eye staring back at her through the slats. Police arrived and searched the house, discovering a makeshift living area in the attic crawl space complete with cups, food wrappers, and a couple of blankets. What made the whole situation exponentially creepier was this discovery. The man living up there wasn't some random intruder but Tracy's ex-boyfriend Nathan, the same one who'd been reporting those strange texts, calling her to report his own bizarre behavior, possibly to deflect suspicion, while secretly living above her bedroom became his twisted routine. Nathan had apparently been entering the house through an unlocked door or window, climbing into the attic and staying there for days at a time. He'd watch through the vents, come down when Tracy left for work, use her computer, charge his phone, and send texts from her devices while she had no idea he was there. More thorough searches revealed he'd created peepholes in the ceiling above multiple rooms, and this pattern had been going on for weeks, possibly months before discovery. Burglary and stalking charges landed Nathan in court, where he couldn't really explain why he'd done it beyond saying he wanted to be close to Tracy and the kids. The judge called it one of the most disturbing cases he'd seen in 20 years on the bench. Case 4. The Collector. A possible break-in at a San Diego storage facility in 2014 brought police expecting a routine burglary investigation. What they found was completely unexpected. One unit contained thousands of items organized with meticulous precision, including jewelry, driver's licenses, photographs, personal documents, clothing, and what appeared to be diary entries. Everything was cataloged, dated, and stored in clear plastic bins with labels that suggested someone had spent years perfecting their system. The items had been stolen from over 300 different homes across 3 states over a period of 12 years. But here's what made investigators deeply uncomfortable. The thief hadn't taken anything valuable in the traditional sense. Electronics, money, and artwork stayed behind while he took personal items like birthday cards, love letters, photographs of families, children's drawings from refrigerators, a woman's hairbrush, someone's wedding invitation, and things with purely sentimental value. The man behind it, whose identity was protected during initial proceedings, was arrested after a security camera caught him leaving the facility. Questioned by detectives, he told them he wasn't stealing, but preserving memories, claiming that people didn't appreciate their own lives enough, that they'd throw away or lose these precious moments, and he was keeping them safe for reasons he seemed unable to fully articulate. One of the most psychologically complex cases she'd encountered. That's how the district attorney later described it. The man wasn't keeping these items for any apparent reason beyond the act of collecting them, had no known connection to the victims, and would spend hours breaking into homes, carefully selecting items that meant something to the families living there, and then meticulously organizing them in storage. Some of the photographs dated back to the 1960s, taken from elderly victims who'd probably forgotten the images even existed. Over 200 counts of burglary brought a 15-year sentence. But the real challenge came after, returning thousands of items to hundreds of people who had no idea they'd been stolen in the first place. Case 5. The Journalist Who Wasn't. Christian Carl Gerhardt's writer convinced everyone in 2001 that he was Clark Rockefeller, a distant member of the famous American dynasty. Working in finance, married to a successful businesswoman, and living in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood gave him the perfect cover for a persona that included throwing parties, making investments, and playing the part of old money aristocrat with flawless precision. None of it was true. Christian was actually a German immigrant who'd entered the United States on a student visa in the 1970s and never left, and he and over 3 decades, he'd assumed multiple identities, each one more elaborate than the last. Christopher Chichester in Los Angeles, Christopher Crowe in Connecticut, and finally Clark Rockefeller in Boston. Each persona came with complete backstories, fake credentials, and carefully constructed social networks that took years to build. The whole thing unraveled in 2008 when Christian kidnapped his own daughter during a custody dispute after his ex-wife discovered he wasn't actually a Rockefeller and filed for divorce. A supervised visit turned into an opportunity when Christian grabbed their 7-year-old daughter and fled, bringing the FBI into the investigation. As his photo was distributed nationally, someone recognized him and arrest came 6 days later in Baltimore. And that's when investigators started pulling the thread. At least 8 different names had covered his movements across decades. And in California, he was connected to a missing persons case from 1985 involving a couple named John and Linda Sohus who disappeared while Christian was renting a guest house on their property. Human remains found buried in the backyard in 1994 were confirmed through DNA testing as John Sohus. John's murder brought a conviction in 2013 and a sentence of 27 years to life, while Linda Sohus has never been found. Prosecutors presented a picture during the trial of someone who'd spent 40 years living as fictional characters, funding his lifestyle through manipulation and deception that fooled countless people. The most chilling part came from people who knew him as Clark Rockefeller. They described him as charming, intelligent, and completely convincing, never suspecting a thing until the truth emerged. These cases mess with your head because they reveal how thin the line is between truth and fiction in everyday life. Someone can live in your walls for months without you knowing. A person can fake an entire identity for decades, and reality can be manipulated so thoroughly that hundreds of people believe something that never happened. So here's my question for you. What's the strangest true crime case you've ever heard about? Drop it in the comments, because I guarantee someone down there has a story that'll make these look normal. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more cases coming that'll make you question everything. Until next time, stay safe out there and maybe check your attic.